Thank you for joining me on this Friday. I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend planned. We have Tropical Storm Gabrielle looking better this afternoon on satellite over the central Atlantic. Still something to watch in Bermuda. Expected to become a hurricane as well as it gets closer to Bermuda, but unlikely to be a threat to any major land at this point. Behind that, a little bit of a lull, but additional development is looking more and more likely as we get to the end of September and into the month of October. We're going to talk about some hot spots to watch and actually where they're coming from and what some of the forecast models are beginning to indicate as far as what's going to happen. Also getting very busy in the Western Pacific with a powerful typhoon expected to impact portions of the Philippines, Taiwan, and eventually China as we get into next week. So I'm going to talk about all that in this video. We're going to start here with what's going on in the United States. And you can see things drying out across Florida. Pretty decent afternoon here with a front moving offshore. We do have a storm system continuing to spin very slowly across the central plains here. That is going to eventually send some rain eastward into areas that very much need it. And we are going to see some occasional wet weather here across the Ohio and Tennessee valleys. And eventually this gets into the Northeast. Now, not a drought busting rain at this point, but certainly it'll be beneficial as this tracks eastward here through the weekend. And behind that, another slow mover here, bringing some rain to portions of the Southwest and Intermountain West. That is partially the remains of what was Tropical Storm Mario a few days ago in the Eastern Pacific. And that moisture will continue to spread eastward. A bigger storm will be impacting the Western U.S. here later on next week. So the weather certainly has been a little bit bizarre this summer. And now as we head into fall, we are going to see even more complicated weather patterns to come. Taking a look at the Atlantic Basin, the only storm on the map right now is Gabrielle, looking better than yesterday. Winds are 50 miles per hour. And the storm is moving west-northwest at 12 miles per hour. You can see it's going to pass safely northeast of the islands here by a few hundred miles. Here's Bermuda, and it will be approaching the island of Bermuda here as we get to late Sunday night and into the early portion of Monday. Behind that system, relatively quiet. We have got a pair of waves, one of which has a 20% chance of developing into our next depression or storm over the next 7 days. And in my opinion, I think it will struggle quite a bit and may not even develop until maybe it gets closer to the islands or to the north of the islands. And that would be at least a week from today. So something to watch right now, but not an immediate threat. And then behind that, we're likely going to see some closer in development as we get later into the month of September. And I talked a little bit about that yesterday. The signal continues today. We don't have, obviously, any kind of skill in predicting who and what and where at this point, but we do have an idea of what the signal is starting to look more and more like. So here's a look at the Tropical Tidbits infrared. This is Gabrielle. You can finally see her. Yesterday, there was a lack of convection. Today, still some wind shear. So the center is to the west of most of our thunderstorm activity, but beginning to organize as that wind shear has begun to weaken. There's a weak wave here behind it. This is something we are going to keep an eye on as it moves into this portion of the Western Caribbean in about 10 or 11 days. Unlikely to develop into anything between now and then, but it may still be something trackable, at least at that point. And then behind it, a bigger wave, which has emerged from Africa. This one, I think, has a better chance of developing. That is the yellow area we talked about. In general, it's going to move in this direction and probably start to curve away from the East Coast beyond that. But we'll have to wait and see because things can still change. Aside from that, things are pretty quiet in the Atlantic. The Pacific has another area that we're watching for development behind the first area, which is unlikely to develop in here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that after we cover the Atlantic Basin here first. Here's a look at the Gulf, the Caribbean Sea. Pretty quiet for the time being. We still have a lot of shower and thunderstorm activity over the central Caribbean, still impacting portions of Puerto Rico, even the Virgin Islands and Hispaniola here with a tropical wave. You will see there's actually a bit of a mid-level spin here over the south central Caribbean. Unlikely to form into anything. It's lacking convection at this point, but it is producing a moist southerly flow up into the eastern portion of Dominican Republic and western Puerto Rico. Some more heavy rain expected there. And then we see the flow has shifted around here, and we've got a frontal boundary in this area, and the flow has come around the southwest, bringing heavy rains to the central Bahamas, to portions of Cuba, and to portions of the Yucatan and the Bay of Campeche as well. But the northern Gulf, relatively quiet, and winds are still hostile as we continue to have wind shear in play here. Got to reload it, but you can see the rain continues here across Puerto Rico and across the Virgin Islands. We do have some flood warnings just to the west of San Juan, heavy rain coming down across the central mountainous area of Puerto Rico as well. Heavy rain over the Mona Passage and portions of the eastern Dominican Republic, including Punta Cana, several inches expected in some locations. And you can see here on the radar this afternoon, there's another batch of heavy rain getting ready to move on to the island here. So not a great end to the week. This is more rain than we've seen in several weeks. You have to go back to Hurricane Aaron, which bombed into a Category 5 north of the islands, moved away, but the moist feed out of the south brought heavy rain to some of these islands. We're actually probably going to see a little bit more out of this system, which is not going to gain any kind of a name, just a tropical wave. Looking at the rest of the Western Atlantic, we don't have any areas of concern outside of Tropical Storm Gabrielle, which is right over here. You can see finally blossoming here, some convection. The wind shear is starting to weaken some. We do have an upper level low pulling away to the west here. We've got a frontal boundary that's activated with showers and storms over the Southwest Atlantic, including the central Bahamas. That will eventually spread towards Bermuda here, but I think the worst is going to stay off to your north and west. The rest of the East Coast is in pretty decent shape here as we start the weekend here. Pretty warm, but we are going to see a front moving to the area. Looking into the deep tropics, you see Gabrielle on the map over here. I'm not going to spend much time more talking about that in this portion of the video. I'll get there in a little bit. Here's the wave behind it. It is losing a lot of its convection, moving quickly to the west and very unlikely to develop into anything. There's some stable dry air here in the way. There's going to be wind shear from the north and east here from Gabrielle as it grows in size here over the weekend. And that is going to hurt this system. It'll cannibalize it, keep it from developing into anything. But we'll have to keep an eye on this as it moves into the Caribbean and eventually the Western Caribbean, where things could become more hospitable for some development. And then finally, in the Eastern Atlantic, nothing of great concern. We do have another wave that has left the coast here. It's pretty big, but it's pretty disorganized. So I don't think it's going to form into anything this weekend. Next week, models indicate it may start to gradually develop and probably at a slower rate than what Gabrielle has, but eventually it could get into something. And this one may be our next storm, which would be Humberto, but it's probably about a week away from that happening. Here's Gabrielle, and you can see loosely defined, it is a tropical storm here. You do see the spin up at this point, and you do see thunderstorm activity on the southern and eastern portion of the storm. So it is a bona fide tropical storm. Still no aircraft data here. We're going off of satellite estimates, but definitely deeper clouds here. In fact, very cold cloud tops, 87 degrees Celsius below. So it's got very heavy rain out, dampening the fish, but that's really about it. Winds 50 miles per hour, the pressure holding steady at this point. And on the water vapor image, you can see that the amount of dry air to the north of the system is beginning to get squashed away. So the environment should become gradually more favorable for this to strengthen into a stronger tropical storm over the weekend, and then eventually a hurricane by the end of this weekend. We don't have any official wind data. We did have this ASCAT here that came through earlier in the day. It did not sample the strongest winds. It missed those, but it does see the circulation. It did measure winds over 30 miles per hour to the north and west of the system. So a lopsided system, as you can imagine, beginning to get a little bit better organized. And the forecasts have come up from the Hurricane Center up to Category 2 now once we get past Bermuda. The good news is that the track has tightened up to the east of Bermuda. The bad news is that we don't want to let our guard down yet in Bermuda. If it does come on the western side of this, we could see some impacts, including tropical storm winds, but not going to be a direct hit on Bermuda at this point. And this will be a stronger system after it curves away than when it approaches. At least that is the expectation. This was the 11 a.m. advisory. The newest advisory is down to 105 and 105 up in here, but it may still get to 110. A slight chance it could get stronger and become a major hurricane. But either way, it's better late than never, but likely our second hurricane of the Atlantic hurricane season, and probably not our last either. The model trends have come back to the right a little bit here in the short term, and then also to the south a little bit here in the longer term, but not any big adjustments today in the track. The intensity forecasts, though, are starting to look a little bit more aggressive here, getting back to where they were a few days ago. And the reason for that is that the wind shear here with our system is starting to let up. And so the stranglehold on the intensity forecast here is coming away. And we're likely going to see a hurricane, as most of our reliable models anyway are showing that. Now, some show a category 2, a few show category 3, and we have one outlier going up to category 4, which I think could be a stretch. But I do think category 3 is a possibility. So we may also have our second major hurricanes of the season. And this has been a weird year. All the hurricanes so far have been major hurricanes. Of course, that's 1-for-1. And all the tropical storms have looked like junk. And, that's just the kind of season we've had so far. But if you look at the surrounding atmosphere, you can see things are going to be a lot more impressive, even though we're going to have this upper level low just to the southwest here. You can kind of see that here. And then you see Gabrielle. But if you look at the, I thought we had a sounding coming in. I guess not, but that's all right. Anyway, you see the upper level low here. Then you see Gabrielle taking over just to the east. So this is actually no longer going to be a problem, and it's going to get out of the way, and Gabrielle is going to take over here. And this is Saturday night, approaching hurricane strength according to the HWRF model. And then as we go farther on in the time, likely a hurricane Sunday morning, and then likely a category 2 hurricane Sunday night as it passes to the east of Bermuda. We may not get much rain in Bermuda. In fact, this model indicates the atmosphere is a little bit too dry and just a few scattered showers. And then it keeps deepening here on Monday, and probably going to be at its strongest here Monday night before you can see the dry air begins to get in and we get stronger westerlies here. And at that point, it's already transitioning past tropical to a post-tropical system, probably by Tuesday night and certainly by Wednesday. And at that point, just a powerful system over the northern Atlantic, which is not uncommon this time of the year. You can see the wind field here as the system is going to be approaching Bermuda. Winds will pick up on the island here in the evening on Sunday, but the strongest winds remain offshore. And if I zoom into Bermuda, you're going to see the European shows wind gusts coming up to about 25, 30 miles per hour Sunday evening, and maybe over 30 miles per hour. If this shifts west, these numbers come up to 40, 50, maybe 55 miles per hour. But with the trends that we're seeing on the models going back to yesterday, since the system reformed a center to the north, it's unlikely going to come up much more. If anything, it's going to come down some. So we're not going to totally rule it out here in Bermuda, but right now the trend is certainly our friend. All right, I want to show you what's going on after Gabrielle. You can see the sinking air takes back over. So the brown indicates upper level convergence, meaning the air at the upper levels comes together and squashes storm chances. Divergence would be the green colors here, and those are the negative numbers. That indicates air that's able to spread out and allow storms to form. So you're seeing we're going into kind of a sinking setup here over the basin. So behind Gabrielle, things are going to be not so conducive for storms to form. However, once we get to next weekend here, we start to see a transition back into a more favorable environment for storm formation. And it becomes very favorable here by the time we get to the very end of September and for the first week of October over the Western Caribbean and Gulf. Does this mean we're going to have a major hurricane in the Gulf or the Caribbean or the Southwest Atlantic? I mean, we can't guarantee that just based on what we're seeing, but the odds definitely favor something in this area versus what we've seen over the last couple of months. This is the time of year climatologically where if we have air spreading out, we certainly have warm water. This will relate to lower wind shear and a better environment overall for storms to form. But it's not a guarantee yet at this point. So taking a look into the Atlantic next week, you see Gabrielle over here lifting away. And let me, I'm not sure if I'm looking at the wrong day here. Okay. So interestingly here, the European AI, okay, here we go. So the European AI has Gabrielle moving away, and then it's got this weak wave coming through the Caribbean, and then the next wave coming behind it, but it doesn't really develop either of those. You will see, though, eventually, as the high builds in here towards the end of next week, we may see a cyclone form here. This could be Humberto as we get to next weekend. That's a wave that just left Africa. So it's about 8-9 days away from the island, something to watch at that point. And more than likely, that is going to recurve and something to watch around Bermuda. Behind it, you can see there are a couple more waves to follow. So I don't think we're quite finished yet heading into October, but we may be past the worst after this system. Looking farther west here, you can see after Gabrielle, this weak wave comes through the Caribbean, and it's not really a big deal at this point. The next system likely avoids the islands, but you can see here next weekend, as that weak wave comes in west of Jamaica, the AI model is indicating there's going to be a more favorable setup for it to develop. And so we could have a system here. In fact, we could have another system. We don't really know just yet. So European AI is kind of going back and forth on where these areas are going to be. But Florida certainly needs to be watching if this is correct. The Bahamas need to watch, and the Gulf needs to be watching as well. The rest of the Gulf, not just Florida. So looking at the ensembles here, you see the track of Gabrielle here. This is through Tuesday night. And then you see the next feature here, likely to miss the islands, but maybe another feature trying to develop here north of Puerto Rico or near the Bahamas. So we got Gabrielle, we've got what could be Humberto up in here late next week, and then we've got a separate area to watch over here, and then the next area I'm going to be watching is down in here. So potentially 3 additional storms here after Gabrielle. As we take a look here at the GenCast, that's an AI model, you can see we've got one system here likely recurving, the next one potentially impacting the East Coast, and then the one to watch here if you're in Florida or in Cuba or in the Gulf here. So potentially 3 separate systems here. So Gabrielle's gone. That's going this way. This could be Humberto. You could see the envelope in this direction. This one after it here, we're going to be watching it. And then there's another area down in here, which I would say would probably be the most concerning of the 4 if we live in the United States. So we're going to keep an eye on these. This is an ensemble. There's no guarantee yet these are going to form, but this is a pretty strong signal and a stronger one than I've seen all season long. And hard to argue with that rising air that's going to be in place here by the end of next week and through the weekend. So that's the Google DeepMind, and then this is the Google GenCast. Similar setup here. This is the next system here. And then we see development here near Bermuda. And then we see development over the Western Caribbean. And the GenCast, a lot more uncertain on what could happen around the Gulf, but fairly certain on something up here and up here. And then, by the way, also has something coming into the islands here around the 1st or 2nd of October. That's 15 days away. A lot can certainly still change, but I've seen run after run after run showing this signal here for multiple storms. So buckle up, stay tuned, but don't cancel your plans just yet. Here's the European AI. And you can see here, when we get to the end of next week, we see potentially Humberto. That's the wave that came off. And again, potentially, I don't know yet if that's going to get named. Then we see the area to watch here near the Bahamas. And then as we move on further, we see an area in the Western Caribbean. These 3 are separate systems, but these 2 may originate from the same large-scale wave. They may. They may not. I don't think it matters because separate storms are separate storms. But you can see here, we've got something here in the Southwest Atlantic. We've got something near the East Coast, and we potentially have something in the Gulf. And that's showing up on 3 different AI ensembles here. So if you take a look at the European charts from the European Center here, you see Gabrielle, you see the potential here for our next feature. And that is Monday. Here's Tuesday, Wednesday. Unfortunately, I guess I could slide this along down this way. And then Thursday. And you see the Europeans not quite as excited about this wave coming off of Africa, but it's still got a chance. Here's Friday. Here's Saturday. Here's next Sunday. So we do have something to watch in Bermuda again after Gabrielle. Here's Monday, and I'm going to back it up from tropical storm to tropical cyclone. And you can see the next area here, the next area here, maybe even something in the Gulf ahead of it. So again, we're tracking a wave that's going to come up this way. We're watching a new area forming in here. We're watching a new area forming in here. And this is kind of a standalone here. I'm not yet that excited about it, but something to watch as well. But things are definitely going to be playing catch up here in the tropical basin. So here we go. Here's Gabrielle. Here's the next wave in the Eastern Pacific. 2 areas to watch. The first one beginning to peter out. I don't think it's going to become NARDA, but I do think the second one has a much better chance, 70%. And then we have 3 separate cyclones here in the Western Pacific. One has already moved inland. That's my tag. Ragasa is on its way to becoming a strong typhoon, probably a super typhoon. And Neogori is likely to be a stronger typhoon as well, something to watch in Japan. And you can see those on the map here. So this is as busy as it's been so far this year. And we've had to wait until the latter portion of September. Here we go. We've got 2 areas to watch in the Eastern Pacific. This one no longer likely to develop into a storm. The one after it has a better shot. And this is going to ride the coast, and something to watch here on the Mexican Riviera. So if you have travel plans there, keep an eye on this, as it could be a player here early next week. And you can see here, area number 1 is fading fast. Area number 2 is picking up intensity here and likely be our next storm. And then in the Western Pacific, you see things are taking off very quickly here. This is the system that is likely going to go north of the Philippines, maybe close to Taiwan, and eventually towards China. This system here has some question marks. It could be a player for Japan, likely to recurve, but may not escape and may try to come back. And I'm going to talk about why that is here in just a moment. But first, I want to show you Ragasa, which is approaching Typhoon intensity here, looking very healthy. And you can see models all deepen this into a powerful Typhoon here, and it may rapidly intensify starting tonight. The HAVS model continues to show this being a Category 5 violent Typhoon. It'll be a Category 3 here by Sunday. By Monday, a Category 4, and probably a Category 5 moving over the Bataan Islands here of the northern Philippines, and maybe getting close to Taiwan as well here. The nearest approach locally is going to be Monday night. And then this continues on as a powerful Typhoon and comes close to Hong Kong, maybe making landfall in South China towards the middle of next week. Here's what the European winds are showing. And you can see wind speeds of 136 knots, which is 160 miles per hour over these islands of the Philippines. That would decimate them. The mountains of Taiwan, depending on where this goes, could see wind gusts over 100 knots, which is 115 miles per hour. And then eventually in China, on the south coast, we have the potential to see winds of 110 to 120 knots, which would be about 130, 140 miles per hour. So this one has a recipe for disaster, and it's going in a spot where the water temperatures are warm and the amount of major land that it goes over is minimal until it gets to China. Here's a look at the one behind it. This is Neoguri. This is now a Typhoon. Winds are 75 miles per hour. It's over the open waters, but continues to strengthen. And you can see some uncertainty here in the longer range. This is Japan over here. Generally speaking, it's a recurve, but when it gets over here, there are some uncomfortably high number of models that try to stall the system, and some kick it back to the west even. It just gets blocked. So something to watch in Japan. I don't think that's a guarantee at this point, but something we need to be watching. And you can see it'll be up to about 125 to 130 miles per hour before the weekend is out. And then the system should weaken some as it moves away to the northeast. But if it comes back, it may have a chance of re-strengthening. And here's a look at the potential winds from the European model. You see the storms safely to the southeast of Japan. Japan's had a lot of systems come close, but not close enough. This one will be farther away than those were. But interestingly, you see the winds picking back up as it turns back to the west here at the end of next week, and then making another loop a lot closer to Japan. And Tokyo's over here. So we're going to be watching this one here, but it's got several days before any potential impact. And we hope that won't be the case. So that's all I've got for you today. I am going to finish out here with a word of Christian, a word from the Bible, a Christian word for the people of God, because I am a Christian man, and because I press forward every day, growing my relationship with Christ, because God has been so good to me, and I pray he's been good to you as well. Paul tells the church of Philippi, Philippians 3:14, New King James Version, I press toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. We all have a finite life here on earth, but because of God, because of his grace and his mercy, because he sent Jesus Christ to die on the cross, resurrected him, we are now granted a new life in Christ. And that is a prize that we are here not to earn, but a prize that is given to us if we make the decision to follow God and to accept Jesus Christ as our Savior. Why do I finish my videos with this all the time? It has absolutely nothing to do with weather, but I truly believe that God has called everybody to do something important in their lives. And at the end of the day, it's to glorify him. We give God all the glory. We are called to do something important and to contribute with our short time on earth. I know you all are contributors. I see a lot of your comments here. I know a lot of you are wise folks. You're loving folks. Not everybody is loving, but I think that's because hurt people hurt people. But at the end of the day, no matter how hurt you are, nobody was hurt worse than Jesus Christ. And yet the wonderful thing is all the pain that you are suffering today goes away when you are given the gate to heaven, the key to the gate to heaven, by following Jesus Christ. And that is the good news I wanted to share with you today before you start your weekend. I plan to be back on here this weekend. I got a lot going on with my family here, but I plan to be back on If not, I'll have updates here. And the best way to get those is if you haven't already, become a subscriber. And please like the video and share it with your friends and leave me a comment or two. I just ask that you keep it just keep it professional here. We're a community of folks here, and I really don't want to be trying to answer folks that let's just put it this way. Um, you'll get a response if you yeah. That's all I'm going to say. All right. Anyway, I appreciate y'all's time today, and I hope everyone has a great weekend. God bless you.